Welcome to Navigating Marketing and AI with Sydne Mullings, the podcast that unravels the dynamic intersection of marketing strategies and the cutting-edge world of artificial intelligence.
Hi, I'm your host, Sydne Mullings. Today, I'm thrilled to have Alisha Lyndon. Alisha is an entrepreneur and a trailblazer in the realm of account-based marketing. She's the founder of Momentum ITSMA, a consulting firm reshaping how businesses approach revenue generation in key accounts. In addition to being the chief executive at Momentum ITSMA, Alisha is a seasoned podcast host, a published author, and an engaging public speaker. Personally, I've had the pleasure of collaborating with her on various occasions, from speaking engagements to being a guest on her insightful podcast. I've even had the honor of contributing to her latest book, The ABM Effect: How to Win, Retain, and Grow Valuable Clients. It's a delight to have you here today. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be with you, Sydne. Really looking forward to collaborating with you on your podcast.
Thanks. To kick things off, could you share a bit about your background?
I started my career early on at Microsoft, so great to be back in the Microsoft virtual office, as it was. From Microsoft, went on to set up a business that specialized in helping organizations grow into the enterprise segment. Went through a transaction on that business in 2008. Actually had dinner with a guy I used to work with at Microsoft, and he inspired the idea behind Momentum ITSMA in 2011 when he told me the story of how some of your big customers were interacting with you and the potential of sales and marketing really coming together for customer value. So Microsoft has been the thread that's run through my career. I'm very proud to have been associated with Microsoft and continue collaborating with you as well.
That's so great. So a bit of a homecoming, if you will.
It is, always.
So maybe share a bit about your company and your role as the chief executive.
So we work with organizations, typically large, complex businesses that are looking to grow their business through winning and expanding large accounts. And we partner with them to optimize how they go to market, how they drive performance in those key accounts, and in total terms, how they enhance their reputation.
I love, based on your background and what your organization does today, I was really excited to reach out to you and get you in this conversation about the intersection between marketing and AI. And so based on your vantage point, this idea that you have both your own organization as well as your interaction with customers, I'd love it if you could maybe start to share with us a bit about what you're seeing both inside your company as well as with some of your clients.
I guess if I kind of pull back, there's a couple of trends that I see in particularly when it comes to customer acquisition and growing in the enterprise space. That the first is that buyers are actually starting to use generative AI in the buying process. Okay. And that has an impact, if you will, both for the customer, but also for providers. What's happening is more and more providers are getting shortlisted. So there's this heightened sense of competition that we're seeing as a trend, and that's only going to grow as generative AI becomes more pervasive in the buying process. Second trend that I think is really interesting in this space is the pace in which organizations are buying. You know, that we're seeing this real race of identifying providers, identifying suppliers quite early on in the buying process. I think our data shows 71% of organizations that go on to win an engagement, win a project or a program, they're actually identified right at the outset of the buying process. So this kind of the pace of buying is speeding up, and clearly lots of value that generative AI can add into that mix.
That's a fascinating addition to the conversation, because I think that race that you mentioned is felt on both sides, right? How are we making sure that we're in the places where buyers will see us? And this idea that buyers are using AI to even accelerate how they're finding their information to make that decision is a fascinating intersection.
there's a spectrum, isn't there, of how organizations are thinking about adopting generative AI. We, on the one hand, there are organizations that want to build the best generative AI powered marketing team on the planet, and then on the other hand, or the other end of the spectrum, you have marketing teams who are being mandated not to use generative AI. There's still not enough governance around it. I guess overarching theme that I'm observing right now, and it's moving quickly, is this the level of noise it's creating. Everybody wants to lean in and learn about generative AI, but being able to cut through the noise and figure out where you are focusing, what are you prioritizing, I think ultimately is where we're seeing some good wins. I think some of the more interesting use cases as well that I know you're developing and we're working on as well is this idea of building on predictive analytics. So if you think about lots of your accounts, you've got historic data.
That's right.
And you can interpret that data with really clear insights. And I think that's creating opportunity to look at your account base differently.
Right. And that idea you raise about the spectrum of where people are from, they're already way ahead of the curve and they want to have the best AI-driven marketing organization, to those that are just like, we're not so sure, right? We're going to wade in slowly. And so what do you think might be some of the key movers that will be important for the organizations that are maybe still waiting in the wings?
So I think what lots of organizations are doing is trying to minimize risk. They're trying to drive standardized approaches. But actually, there's a whole different way of looking at this. And I think, yes, use cases are important. But where I see real value is leveraging generative AI as a way of inspiring critical thinking, not just doing work faster or quicker. And so particularly if I look at your client acquisition and how you're winning and growing accounts, using AI to be curious and develop a genuine understanding of customers will help marketers be more customer centric versus going, well, here's an automated workflow and let me roll that out. So like we've done across our entire organization, we've standardized on Copilot. We have spun out various apps, various bots, and it's been a fantastic literacy building exercise across our business. So I think starting there is a really, really good place to start, and not just focusing on use case, focusing on that critical thinking and how the team are engaging. Secondly, and I guess my passion, lifelong learner, and I feel like we're all here to learn. Everybody wants to do more for less. There's clearly lots of pressure, and there's not a day that goes by that we don't see another press article of company is downsized and they're automating such and such workflows. And I think this idea of within marketing, yes, we can do things quicker by leveraging generative AI. But actually, there's also a piece here about how do you use it to learn. So, testing out prompts, have a dialogue with generative AI. Don't just look for the answer. So, not a kind of means to an end. Third would be this idea of don't just have an information transfer. Don't make it just a kind of crude information exchange. Think about how you're using generative AI to really solve marketing problems. It's really building the practice of generative AI as opposed to just going, we came up with a headline or we spun out some social posts using generative AI.
I love that. I love even the way you've talked about that continuum, right? You can start off with what or just some of those efficiency plays. How do we do this thing faster? But this movement into a conversation in learning how to use your curiosity to explore leveraging AI in the experimentation as being really a central part of the journey. I think that's really important conversation to have. It's certainly a way we've started within our organization, which is, okay, we can do all that work on the data and we can figure out how to customize the next thing. But how are we starting to get more curious about the combinations of factors? How are we starting to get more curious about combining insights we have across different types of customers and use it to frankly ask more questions and have those questions more questions be the interesting part, not necessarily, to your point, what's the one answer. So as we think about what getting started may look like, what would you recommend some of those people who are maybe still waiting a little bit? Where should they get started?
I think embrace generative AI, build literacy. There can be so much swirl around how should generative AI be adopted? Do we have access to this particular data model? Do we have access to this information or data source? So I think getting some static out the way is always good, and then giving permission to operate, permission to be curious. Not just expect that because we're leveraging generative AI, we're going to produce 20 more blog posts from this thought leadership report versus 10. Having some space to think differently, that's going to drive so much more long-term value versus the kind of quick wins. And actually this will move quite quickly, but in the next 12 months, I'm confident that there's some really strong use cases that organizations can leverage.
Well, I would have expected nothing less from you of figuring out how do we get that customer at the center and understanding how we learn about them, learn from them, and how we really build our approach and leverage some of these new tools to our benefit. So I am so appreciative of you taking the time to join this conversation. I'm excited to keep our partnership going. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights.
Great to be on with you, Sydney. Thanks so much for the conversation.